Welcome to the More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. I'm Kevin Kelton, and today I have a couple of unique or different people who are joining me, not our regular crew. First of all, I want to introduce to you Steve Leon. Steve is a former comedy development executive at ABC, NBC, and Paramount Television. He also created and executive produced Home and Family for the Hallmark Channel and has produced a number of movies for them as well. And his most important credit on this show is that he is my cousin. Hi, Steve.
Kevin, how you doing? It's great to be here.
And our other guest tonight, Mark Rappaport, is a former TV promotions executive for NBC and ABC, and also wrote an episode of the ABC hit comedy series Roseanne, and produced a series called Travel Channel Secrets for, of course, the Travel Channel. And his nepotism connection to me is he's also my college roommate. Hello, Mark.
Hello. How are you today?
Great. So those were some long intros. And since the three of us cumulatively have so much experience in making entertainment and comedy television, tonight we're going to talk about politics. Because who wants to talk about that other stuff? So, guys, let's just jump right into it. Yesterday was a staggeringly bad day for one Donald John Trump. The New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, sued Trump for staggering fraud, as she described it, by overvaluing his assets by billions of dollars in what she called a sprawling scheme. Did either of you guys have a chance to catch her press conference?
I saw part of it, the important parts.
So what are your takeaways? Obviously, this guy is dancing, like in the old Westerns when somebody used to say dance and they would shoot bullets at their feet. The courts are now shooting bullets at this guy's feet, and he's dancing pretty fast. Are any of them going to hit him?
Letitia James has an incredibly thorough brief on this. It's over 200 pages, goes back 10 years. Facts are incontrovertible. Trump very simply overstated the income, the value of most of his properties so that he can get bank loans, and understated the value so he didn't have to pay taxes.
Yeah, but now he's trying to say, well, the lenders, they should have done their due diligence. It wasn't up to me, it was up to them, which I don't know whether that's going to hold up in court.
Basically, what he's saying is, I'm allowed to lie as much as I want, and it's up to them to catch me.
Yeah, that's his defense.
Well, what's interesting is it's a civil lawsuit. There's no penalty other than money.
Right.
So he can't go to jail for this. But I find it's interesting that the government's saying, we don't know if we can find you guilty enough to go to jail because that's a higher standard. We're going to go for the lower standard, which is a civil case. And we're going to just try to get money back from you, something like $250 million. Actually, it could be more than, I heard it could be up to 500, maybe even more than that. So it could be close to almost $1 billion at some point, which it's kind of interesting that that they say we want money, but we don't want to put you in jail. You committed a crime, but we only want money for it.
That's not quite what they're saying. Just because, first of all, they did refer him for possible criminal charges to the Justice Department and to the Internal Revenue Service.
Right, but they're not interested. They think that's small potatoes compared to insurrection and stealing confidential secrets and things like that. Right. So for them, a little lawsuit with some money for the federal government doesn't really mean anything.
Well, he also was referred. This case was also referred to the city of New York as well as the state of New York. And I think the thinking is it's easier for us to get him on civil because Trump and his family took the fifth about 400 to 500 times each in their depositions, all of which can be used in a civil case.
Right.
And what they're thinking is they're going to be able to build off of the civil into criminal.
Right. And also, two other reasons to go for the civil case is you only need to prove a preponderance of the evidence.
Right, so
it's a much lower standard than beyond a reasonable doubt. And as Steve kind of alluded to, not only did his kids take the fifth, but a key piece of testimony would be from Alan Weisselberg. So not only are they going for the civil case because of the lower standard for proof, but also because it's not a criminal case, they may be able to compel Alan Weisselberg, the CFO of Trump's organization, who has a lot of information about this stuff. They may be able to compel him to testify, where in a criminal case, he might be able to take the fifth.
But it might also be part of his deal that he has to testify. We don't know that.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
Now, most civil cases, I did a little bit of reading on this, about 90% of civil cases settle out of court. So I wonder if this one will actually go to court. It's 10%. Very few civil cases actually go to court. So we'll see what actually happens with this one, if they'll settle out of court. And save themselves
I don't see Trump settling. Like, what is New York State going to do? Say, we'll take 125 million? You think Trump's going to hand that over? I don't think so.
You think he's going to want to go to court on this one? Okay, we'll see.
I don't think he wants to. I don't know what his options are. I don't know how you settle this.
Well,
I don't think Trump would accept that.
Yeah, they can't be on any boards. They can't be any kind of corporate level of leadership.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the punishment.
Yeah. And another thing that happened yesterday was that the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the Justice Department, allowing them to continue its criminal investigation of the purloined confidential documents. So, like I said, it was a twofer day for him, a bad day on two fronts. Anybody think that this is going to deter him from running for president?
I do.
You do? Okay.
Oh, absolutely. First off, he's got 6 criminal investigations and a civil against him. New news that just came in before we got on the air as well is that Judge Raymond Dearie, the special master in Brooklyn, has now told Trump's lawyers, if you have any belief and evidence that the Justice Department planted evidence in Mar-a-Lago or put things in there that didn't belong, you have till the 30th to let us know. So he's putting the screws on Trump. Trump can't get out of this vice. He's going to have to, number one, admit that the government did not plant evidence, and number two, his lawyers are going to have to go on record about whether the documents were classified or not classified.
Yeah, and again, the 11th Circuit said it really doesn't make a difference. He had no right to have them, and he had no right to declassify them. So, as you said, the vice is tightening around this guy.
But, we've heard that so many times.
Yeah.
How many times have you, in the last, 6 years since he's been president, and we say, oh, yeah, they got him this time.
I didn't say got him. No, your point is well taken.
You've said that to me so many. Oh, the vice is tightening on this guy. Okay, so what? I mean, he's like the perils of Pauline. He'll just get out of it, and we'll see him in the next episode. This guy is never going to get caught. He will die first.
Okay.
He's the ultimate mafia boss, Mark. That's who he is.
He's not, because all of those guys went to jail. Every one of them. And
so will he.
He will not go to jail. Okay, so let me bring this up for Kevin, because I love asking Kevin these kinds of hypotheticals. Okay, Trump gets convicted and he has to go to jail. Tell me your scenario, because you always have a scenario.
He still runs for president. I don't think
the one thing about him going to jail is that at least his orange hair will match his orange jumpsuit.
So we've talked about him, but he's not the only potential 2024 presidential candidate who's got some legal troubles these days. In fact, I would put it out there that Ron DeSantis might have even more serious legal troubles now that he's being sued over this migrant kidnapping stunt of his, because I think it's just the first of many, many lawsuits that he's going to be facing. And I think they're going to be lawsuits against him personally.
Well, I think he can just declare that he's a travel agent and he was creating a travel opportunity for international travelers.
Promoting tourism, sure.
Promoting tourism. He says, we want people from Central and South America to see Martha's Vineyard. And if they're not going to go on their own, we're going to bring them there so they can go back and have other people talk about how wonderful it is there.
The bottom line here is that none of that is going to be serious enough to really impact him in any potential run. The stuff with Trump, especially the January 6th stuff, and we don't know what the Justice Department is going to exactly do. That stuff is going to have a catastrophic impact on him. He's not going to be able to run for president.
Okay, well, we'll see. I still think that in the end, because I agree with Mark, nothing sticks to Donald Trump. DeSantis is going to have some heavy legal problems, but I think that he's too invested in the idea of running for president. So I still think that we're looking at a primary season that's going to have Trump, DeSantis, Pence possibly. I believe Greg Abbott out of my new home state of Texas will be running, maybe Nikki Haley. And so I started thinking the other day about what that's going to look like, that primary season. And I'm actually now starting to look forward to it. Not because, I don't like the idea of Trump getting the nomination, and I think he's got a damn good chance of it. But it's sure going to be fun to see him eviscerating Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott and Nikki Haley on a daily basis. Because God only knows what he's going to say about Greg Abbott being in a wheelchair or Ron DeSantis's, puffy face, or what he'll say about Nikki Haley.
Well, I think that Nikki Haley actually is a really interesting story, because if Trump does run, Nikki Haley, I think, provides the most help as a possible vice presidential candidate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Assuming that Trump can patch up things with her, because they had a falling out. I don't know whether he's capable of that or not, but I guess if people came to him and said she's the only acceptable candidate because you need a female, I suppose maybe he could eat his pride.
Well, she helps him with the abortion issue, no question about that. She's an attractive female. She has national security exposure, having worked in the UN, and she's incredibly likable. He gets helped on a plethora of levels with her. Okay.
The other thing that we wanted to talk about while we're still on politics, Mr. Putin is starting to panic, I think, a little bit in his war against Ukraine. Called up 300,000 reservists, he called them up, to potentially be troops in his army in Ukraine. And Mark, you had an insight into this that maybe is different than most people's because of a personal connection to Russia, right?
Yeah, I know somebody whose son is in Russia right now. He's about 30. He's married. He has a little baby. So she was on the phone with him for about 3 hours and figuring out how the hell he gets out of the country. So my observation and my thought to her is, I said, it shows you how loyal Russians are, in that their president calls them up to war and they all plan to leave. And it's so problematic that they can't get tickets now, that every flight out of the country has been booked up for weeks. So you have to plan weeks and weeks in advance to get out of there. And that's what's going on right now. So she and any male between 18 and 35 is planning to get out of the country. Now, I wouldn't say every one of them, but a tremendous amount. They're leaving by land. They're going to Finland. They're leaving by air. And what's interesting is that Aeroflot, which is the state airline, is actually still flying people out of the country. So I think their attitude is, if you don't want to fight, you can leave. But if you're here, you're going to have to fight. So either get out of the country or you're going to have to fight for us.
Well, I would say that's a liberal interpretation. Let's remember that he just made this pronouncement yesterday as we podcast. Give it another day or two, and I'll bet you that they have people stationed at the airports stopping those men from getting on planes. The other thing I was thinking when I heard 300,000 that he's calling up, essentially it's a draft, right? And I was thinking,
it is a draft.
It took Lyndon Johnson 4 years to get to 250,000 troops in Vietnam. This guy is getting to 300,000 or more in the matter of 6 months or 8 months, let's say. What does that bode for his, I just don't believe that he is impervious to the disappointment of the Russian people and possibly some kind of a revolt, if not a revolution.
Well, what I've heard is the revolt will come from the Russian mothers.
Mm-hmm.
This is what's going to happen, because the Russian women were not going to allow their children to go. And that's where it's going to start. And people are going to start defending their mothers against their country. They're going to say they're going to choose mother or Mother Russia. And they're going to choose their mothers. And that's where that pushback is going to come from. That's my prediction. That's my understanding of the situation.
What this is also doing is it's forcing Russians to now confront the fact, oh, there really is a war in Ukraine. And oh, it's really not going so well if we're calling up more troops after 6 months. So there's a lot for Putin to now answer to.
Also, if you call it a war still, you will get arrested and put in jail for calling it a war. So they're asking for 300,000 people to sign up for something, but they're not allowed to call it a war. And if you call it a war, you will literally be arrested. They've arrested 1,200 or 12,000, I forget the number, people, and put them in jail for saying it is a war. So it's a very kind of complicated thing going on there. I wonder, I'd like to see what people are really saying, because at some point, I think there has to be a turn. There has to be enough people saying, you know what, we don't want to do this. When enough mothers, I can't keep going back to, are getting their children out of the country. They're not saying, oh, you know what, you should be fighting. There was that, I don't know if you remember the scene in Love and Death. If you remember that movie, it was about the Russian Revolution.
Yes.
And Woody Allen's character says, I don't want to go to war. I don't want to fight. And his mother says, oh, he's a coward. He should go fight. And then he looks at the camera and says, my mother, everybody, this is my mother. So
this one will be the opposite.
This will be that's the joke, is that the mothers are protecting their children. And this woman I know is a mother, and they were all planning. The whole family was on the phone. They're a huge family for 3 hours, strategizing how to get all of their young male children out of the country.
Wow.
All of
Unbelievable.
All of them. So
yeah, I got to figure, you're a 30-year-old, 35-year-old guy in Russia. You did some time in the military. Maybe you even saw some action. I wouldn't know exactly where a 35-year-old might have seen action in the last 15 years. But you've done your time, and you don't want to go back into the military and fight in a hot war.
Also, there's not enough training. They don't have the training to get these people. So they'll just send all of these young guys to the front line, and they'll just be killed. They're not going to have how to fight against the Ukrainians.
Yeah,
they're going to be slaughtered. Anybody who goes, any young guy who's going to train now in the next few weeks and get sent to the front line is cannon fodder.
Yep.
Yeah, and they're saying it's going to take a minimum of 3 months for anybody to be trained well enough, and most of these people will not be trained well enough or be able to fit in. What this is turning out to be is Afghanistan. And the Russian people are saying, oh, you mean this special military operation, which we're not allowed to call a war? That's the new name of it.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't know if you read this. I just read this today. About 2 hours after Putin announced it, there was a surge in their version of Google searches. I don't know exactly what their search engine is, but there was a surge in one topic. Do either of you know what that topic was?
Getting the fuck out of Dodge.
How to break an arm safely. That's true. That is true. So
that's
maybe
funny.
Maybe they will, Putin will quickly pass some kind of a rule that says if you have a broken limb, you can only be deferred until your limb heals.
You realize now there's going to be a second Russian front. I mean, first there was the German-Russian front, and now there's the Russian-Russian front.
Yeah. And again,
and the Russian people are going to be equally petrified about going to the Russian front.
Yeah. I'll say it again. I do not think this man is impervious to being, displaced. Whether you want to call it overthrown, whether he somehow voluntarily steps aside. People think about Stalin, who was the leader till death, but Khrushchev didn't make it all the way through. Brezhnev, I do not think died in office. I could be wrong about that. Steve, you might remember better than I do. Certainly, Gorbachev did not last more than a decade or so in that role. And again, Boris Yeltsin, I don't remember whether he died in office or was replaced.
No. Brezhnev, by the way, was the only one of those who died in office.
Okay. So, but Russian leaders are not necessarily leaders for life. We like to think that they have so insulated themselves that nothing can stop them and no one can overthrow them. But politics has a way of catching up to people, even in Russia.
Well, let me ask you guys a question because, I've read a bit about this and nobody's really talking about this angle. And I think it's a really interesting one. What do you think Xi said to Putin about this? And what do you think China's position is?
That's a good question because he did say that Xi had some reservations. I think he was probably candid with, I don't know how candid this guy can be, but I think that he probably, in his own way, made it clear that he doesn't really think that this is a good operation for Russia. I suspect that Xi made it clear to him, maybe not directly, but he implied in no uncertain way that China and he do not think that this was, one, a good idea, and two, it's going well for him. And that he better have an end game. That's what I think what the message was.
So do you think that Xi is in favor of this new call-up and this new enhancement of the war effort?
I don't know whether they discussed that or not. Frankly, I don't think any world leaders are in favor of this thing escalated.
And Modi, of course, said this is not a time for war. So the leader of the other great, huge nation that's going to be able to buy gas and other things from Russia. They're against it too. But
remember, Steve, it's not a war, so there's no problem there. Let's now get off politics for a couple of minutes. There's a couple of things I wanted to bring up. I was reading that D.C., the District of Columbia, has got a referendum coming up on their fall ballot about tipped minimum wage in the District of Columbia. Like a lot of states, they have a lower minimum wage for employees who can make tips or work in establishments where tips are received. And the referendum wants to do away with that, wants to set a standard one-stage minimum wage for everyone who's an employee in the state. And obviously, the restaurant industry is against it. I think it's a great idea. Before I go into my details on it or my thoughts on it, I'm curious, do you guys have any opinion on that?
What I'm interested in is the fact it's going to increase the minimum wage so much, but from the other point of view is that it could put a lot of restaurants out of business.
Well, let me ask you about that, Steve, because that is the argument that the restaurants are putting out, that this is going to increase their labor costs and therefore decrease jobs or spike menu prices. But let me ask you this. Why would it? Because the current law now is that if an employee after tips has not made the state minimum wage, the higher one, that the restaurant has to pay them that wage for that hour. So if I have a 3-hour shift and I made less than $45, they have to bring me up to $45. So how is it different either way? I don't get it.
Why don't we just make this just simple? And I know Kevin will probably jump in with some agreement on this because we have the same attitude towards tipping. Make tipping illegal. Why don't we just make this simple? Everybody who has a job and there's a minimum wage, you get that minimum wage or more, depending on what your value is to that company. I go in and I order a hamburger in a restaurant. I sit down, I get served my hamburger. It says it's $20. I pay my $20 and my tax, and that's it. And everybody gets paid. Why are we even discussing that tipping should even exist? This is the opportunity to get rid of tipping, have everybody just get paid a proper amount. If restaurant menu prices are going to go up, I have a choice whether to go into that restaurant or not. I actually want to know my hamburger is $20 and not that it's $13.95 and then I still have to tip on top of that. Let's just make everything simple. Why are we still in this archaic way of thinking? This is the opportunity to make a change where everything is more equitable and simpler and more transparent.
And you're right about me. I totally, completely agree. And to build on your thought, you go and you order your hamburger, you get served. Okay. Now, it used to be that, well, not used to be, it still is, that people would say, well, you tip because you got good service, and it's an incentive for the server to give you better service. I say their incentive is their job now because they're making minimum wage. And if you don't get good service, your recourse is report it to the manager. So they still have an incentive to give you good service.
Listen, I go to all kinds of places that serve me in different kinds of ways. I go to the supermarket every week. Somebody rings up my items. They put it in a bag. Sometimes when I ask them, I say, hey, I need some help. Where's the Pringles? They'll bring me to the Pringles section and they'll hand me a thing of Pringles. Oh, I didn't know you moved it over here. I get the same service no matter where I go. I go into a furniture store. I go to a shoe store. I go into anything. I go into Home Depot. Every place I go, I get service, and I do not tip them. And they're all either incentivized to give me good service or not work there. I mean, some stores I don't go to because, you know what? They're lousy. I'll go to some stores over other stores because I know, that some kind of service stores where like a Home Depot, I might go to Lowe's. I go to the Lowe's paint department because the guy there gives me better service than the paint guy at Home Depot. But Home Depot knows more about, electrical and plumbing, so I go there for that. So everyone's incentivized to work. Everybody does a service. Everybody does a job. Everybody is serving me in every business. Why is the restaurants any different? What is different about a restaurant other than tradition? Well, we're done with that. Let's move on. This is a perfect opportunity to destroy a bad system and replace it with a good system. I'm all in favor of it. I think there should be a decent minimum wage that everyone should get, and people should get more than minimum wage if it justifies it. And if a restaurant goes out of business, then they're not a good restaurant, because a good restaurant will not go out of business if they pay their employees properly and they change the menu.
Right. Let the incentive, like in any job, and I think I'm just saying the same thing that you just did, let the incentive be keeping your job. I'm fine with that. And if I don't get a flirty waiter or waitress at the restaurant because they're not incentivized to be particularly friendly to me, I'll live with that. The other thing that drives me nuts.
Let me ask you guys a question here.
Yeah.
Have they done any research which states what actual amount that a waiter or a waitress brings home on an average compared to the minimum wage?
I'm sure they've done the research. I don't know the answer, though.
Oh, it's a really important question to know. I mean, do restaurant workers make a great deal more with tipping, or do they end up falling at a lower level than the minimum wage? And without that answer, I don't know how you really make a decision about it.
It doesn't matter, because if the people in the restaurants are not making enough money, then they won't work there, and that restaurant won't be in business. So the restaurant has to raise their prices appropriately. They have to be a good restaurant. They have to hire good people, and the market will take care of itself. So I don't think that research needs to be done. It's not necessary. No other business has to worry about that situation. Pay people accordingly and let businesses live or die depending on how good they are as a business.
There are many businesses where they have taken tipping out, and tipping is no longer allowed. It's now given to the restaurant as what is called an administration fee. And the restaurant chooses how to split that fee up, including for what they say might be insurance, medical, things of that nature. And they give a little bit to the people in the front part of the restaurant and a little bit to the back. And basically, from what I've heard, restaurant employees are furious about that and end up making a great deal less.
And here's the thing, and again, I know because Mark and I have had some conversations about this recently. That's bullshit, because charge what you need to charge on the menu for the menu items to run your restaurant. That's your business model. If you cannot make a living from the menu items you are selling, then either raise the prices that you charge or go out of business. If your business model doesn't work, that's on you, not on your employees and not on your customers. And as Mark and I talked about the other day, this is sort of like the resort fees. that hotels are now hitting us up for. Jess and I, a couple of weeks ago, we got a gift from some of our great neighbors for an overnight at a resort. And we spent the night and it was great, but we noticed on the bill, it's a resort and yet they charged a resort fee. And this was not a Holiday Inn or a Best Westin or a Doubletree. This was a resort. And just to get the internet and one or two other things, $30 resort fee.
Yeah, you get water. A lot of times they say, because you're getting water. I've heard that in many restaurants. I've traveled, and I said, what's part of the resort fee? Well, you get 2 free waters. Well, they're not free. They're part of my resort fee.
Yeah, you buy your own.
But it's not the same. Resort fees, I think, are a horrible addition because they're hidden and you don't find out about it until you get the bill. But I want to go back to the restaurant situation, because what's happening right now, not only are restaurants raising their prices as they need to, but the cost of the ingredients is going up so dramatically that many restaurant owners are losing everything on that basis.
Okay.
So, I feel a sense of sympathy for restaurant owners as well, because, they're trying to hold the line on prices or they're going to lose their clientele. I know as an example, I'm being much more careful about what restaurants I go to and when I go to restaurants than I was 3 months ago.
But why don't you have that same sympathy for grocery store owners, for mom and pop grocery store owners? Their ingredients are going up as well, and they have to raise their prices. And people say, you know what? I'm not going to go to the mom and pop grocery store. I'm going to go to the big chain because it's cheaper. It's the same thing. It's capitalism. If it doesn't work, you go out of business. Why do they get a break compared to any other business? They're not special. So you don't go out to eat. It doesn't matter. We can live without as many restaurants. Maybe there are too many restaurants. I'm not sure why restaurants seem to have this special place in our society where we have to treat them in this special way. They're not. They're just part of the same system. As Kevin eloquently said, if your business model doesn't work, you go out of business. It's that simple.
Yeah. And again, if you think about tipping, first of all, tipping came into existence before there was such a thing as the minimum wage. The idea was these are really, truly the working class, the lowest of the working class. And yes, I'm rich enough that I could eat in a restaurant, or doing well enough that I could eat in a restaurant. I'll throw the server an extra 25 cents, 50 cents, $1, whatever it was back in the day, which, by the way, back in the days before any of us here were born. But now that we have a national minimum wage, again, we're circling back. Let's just make that across the board. It should be a living wage. And if $12 wasn't the number and it needs to be $15, then it should be that. If $15 is not the number because of inflation, then that has to go up, just as there are cost of living adjustments built into Social Security and other government programs. And by the way, Congress seems to get cost of living adjustments on a fairly regular basis. So we're all saying, I think, essentially the same thing. Steve may be showing a little bit more empathy towards the restaurant owners and towards the restaurant employees, and there's nothing wrong with that. And by the way, a third thing, I'm ranting here, a third thing is the restaurants are dipping into that money. It's not all going to the employees. In fact, if I tip and it's on the bill, it's on the receipt, I don't know how much, if any of it, is going to the employees.
Yes, that's the other thing, right? We don't know if it's even trickling down.
Hey, don't they legally have to give the employees the money?
Who's going to check on that? Is there a tipping police? Is there somebody going to each restaurant and making sure that happens? I don't know. Maybe they do. Maybe they share it. I don't know. I know if I put it in somebody's hand, at least then it's their responsibility. If they want to share it with other people, they want to give it to their boss. That's what I do with my tipping when I have those kinds of situations. And I actually over-tip in those situations as well. It's not that I don't believe in tipping at all. I just don't think restaurants should be able to pay their people less because they're getting tips. I also think tips are actually condescending. I get to decide, you get more money, you don't get more money. It's not based on their ability. Pretty waitresses get more money than not pretty waitresses. So is that fair? The whole thing is it's an unfair system. It's very condescending. and I think it probably came about that way, that rich people could afford to do it. Oh, I'll throw you a few shekels, and they didn't care if they're condescending. But I think we're past that as a society. That's what I think about restaurants. Now, people who work for Uber and those kind of things, they don't get paid enough money. Uber takes 50%. So you go in an Uber and it's a $30 cab ride. Uber gets $15. They get half of that money. So that guy drove for $15. I used to take trips to the airport. It cost me $40, $45. Way back, I came from the airport. It cost me $18. And that guy got $9. He told me, he said, I said, how much you get? He says, I'm going to get $9 for this. I gave him a $40 cash tip because I used to pay $40 for that trip. So I gave him the $40. I said, I'm giving you the money I used to pay for this trip because Uber took all of your money. So there's something wrong with this whole system. And I love the idea of minimum wage and people getting paid properly. And I would love to get rid of tipping. Because it exists, I actually do tip generously, but that's just a personal thing, but I really don't believe in it.
Well, there you go. There you go. And with that, we have talked for a sufficient length. My internet went out about 17 times during this podcast. So I think it's telling me, Kevin, get the heck off the internet. I want to thank you guys. This has been a fun conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Steve, did you have a fun time?
I think you were more interested in the tipping things than the Trump things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're talking pocketbook issues here. Pocketbook issues. So, guys, thank you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed us, please share our link on your Facebook timeline so your friends can follow us as well. And for the More Perfect Union, this is Kevin Kelton saying thank you, and we'll see you next time.